The night she got pulled over, Leah Donovan had been awake for 19 hours straight. She wasn't thinking about that, though. She was thinking about the boy in bed, 7 years old, post-op from a splenectomy, and the way he'd grabbed her hand when she'd told him his mom was just down the hall. She was thinking about whether she'd remembered to sign off the discharge notes for the woman in room 12. She was thinking about the leftover pad thai in her fridge and how badly she wanted it. She wasn't thinking about the lights in her rearview mirror. But there they were. Red and blue, pulsing against the wet asphalt of Route 9, out past the edge of Claremont where the streetlights got sparse and the road curved through a stretch of trees that felt like they were leaning in. It was 2:14 in the morning. Leah signaled, pulled her car to the shoulder, and turned off the engine. She'd been a trauma nurse for 8 years, 4 of them in a forward surgical unit in Afghanistan before she ever set foot in a civilian hospital. She knew how to stay calm when things went wrong. She put her hands on the steering wheel where they could be seen. The officer took his time. She watched in the side mirror as he sat in his cruiser for nearly 2 full minutes before the door opened. He was tall, broad across the shoulders, with the kind of walk that announced itself before he said a word. His name tag read Hargrove. "Lice and registration," he said. "No greeting, no reason for the stop." Leah reached slowly into her glove compartment. Her hospital badge was clipped to her scrub top, the blue one she'd been wearing since she'd clocked in at 6 the previous morning. She handed him the documents. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" "I don't," she said. "I don't believe I was speeding." He shone his flashlight across the documents, then into her face. She kept her eyes forward. "You were weaving," he said. She hadn't been weaving. She'd been driving in a straight line for 11 miles, but she said, "I'm sorry, I didn't realize. I just finished a double shift at Claremont General. I'm heading home. You been drinking tonight?" "No." "You sure about that?" "I'm sure." He asked her to step out of the vehicle. She didn't argue. That was the thing people didn't understand. Arguing didn't help, and Leah had learned, in the Army and in the ER and in every space where someone had more institutional power than she did, that the moment you started raising your voice was the moment the conversation stopped being about the truth. She got out of the car. That was when it started. Officer Hargrove told her to walk a straight line along the shoulder. Leah told him, clearly and without any particular emotion, that she had a documented injury to her right knee, a fragment wound from an IED outside of Kandahar that gave her a visible limp, particularly after long periods of standing. She told him she would do her best, but that the walk might not look the way he expected. He told her to walk the line. She walked it. She wobbled slightly on the uneven gravel. She didn't fall. She didn't stumble, but she wobbled, and that wobble was, apparently, enough. "I'm going to ask you to submit to a breathalyzer," he said. She submitted. She blew There was a pause, a long one. Leah watched his face and saw something shift in it, not embarrassment, not relief. Something harder than that. Something that had made up its mind already and didn't appreciate being contradicted. "I'm still not satisfied," he said. "I'm going to need you to come with me to the station." "On what grounds?" she asked. She kept her voice flat. She knew how to do that. "Suspicion of impairment. We'll do a blood draw at the station. I blew 0. Breathalyzers can miss certain substances. I haven't taken any substances. I'm a nurse. I just finished a shift. You can call the hospital. They can confirm I was there until 40 minutes ago. Ma'am, I need you to come with me." She looked at him for a moment. The road was empty. The trees were still. Somewhere in the distance, a truck crossed an overpass, and its lights swept through the dark like a slow blink. "All right," she said. "Can I lock my car?" He watched her lock it. He walked her to his cruiser. He didn't handcuff her, but he didn't open the door for her either. Just waited while she climbed into the back seat on her own, the knee screaming the whole way down. At the station, they put her in a gray room that smelled like burnt coffee and floor wax. There was a table, 2 chairs, a camera mounted in the upper corner of the wall. She'd been in worse rooms, a lot worse. The desk sergeant who processed her was a woman named Alvarez who looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. She gave Leah a form to fill out. Leah filled it out. She listed her name, her address, her occupation. She wrote down the name of her commanding officer from Fort Bragg, a formality she'd learned to include whenever she suspected she might need it. The blood draw happened at 3:00 a.m. A technician she'd never met drew 2 vials and sealed them. Leah had watched the process carefully. She knew what to look for. Then she sat, and she sat, and she sat. Hargrove didn't come back. No one told her anything. She wasn't under arrest. She'd confirmed that clearly, and Alvarez had confirmed it back, which meant she was technically free to leave. But her car was on the shoulder of Route 9, 2 miles away, and she had no way to get there. And something in the particular quality of the silence in that room told her that leaving without a clear answer would be used against her somehow. So she stayed. At 4:27 a.m., the door opened and a different officer walked in. His name was Sergeant Cole Dryden. He was maybe 45, with a gray streak through his hair and the kind of eyes that had seen enough to stop performing. He sat down across from her, set a folder on the table, and said without preamble, "You're a combat veteran." "I am," Leah said. Afghanistan. 2 tours, 3rd Surgical Battalion." He nodded slowly. He opened the folder. She couldn't see what was in it, but she saw him read something, then read it again. "You were a flight nurse," he said. "Trauma nurse." "I flew medevac on the 2nd tour." He closed the folder. He looked at her for a long moment, and then he said something she hadn't expected. "I'm sorry about tonight." She didn't say anything. "I reviewed the dashcam from Officer Hargrove's unit. I reviewed the breathalyzer results. I pulled your record." He folded his hands on the table. "You have no priors. You have a Purple Heart and a Meritorious Service Medal, and you have been employed at Claremont General for the past 4 years with, from what I can see, a spotless record." He paused. There was no legal basis for this stop. The room was very quiet. "Then I'd like to go home," Leah said. "I'm going to arrange that. I'm also going to tell you that I'm opening an internal review of Officer Hargrove's conduct tonight. I want you to know that before you walk out of here." She studied him. She was looking for the thing that was wrong with it. The clause buried in the kindness, the part where this became something she'd regret. She'd had enough experience with institutions to know that internal reviews could go either way, and more often than not, they went the way of the institution. "What does an internal review look like?" she asked. "It means I write a report. It goes to the lieutenant. From there it goes to the Department Conduct Board." He met her eyes. "I'll tell you plainly, I can't promise what they'll do with it, but I can promise that what I write will be accurate." She thought about that. "I want a copy of the dashcam footage," she said. "You're entitled to request it. I'm requesting it now." He wrote something on a notepad. "I'll make sure the request is logged." A patrol officer drove her back to her car at 5:05 in the morning. The sun was just beginning to press up against the horizon, turning the tree line that brownish gold that she'd always thought was the most honest color in the world. Her car was where she'd left it. She got in, sat for a moment with her hands on the wheel, and then she drove home. She didn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee and her laptop, and she wrote down everything she remembered, every word, every time, every detail, while it was still fresh. She'd done the same thing after a bad incident in Kandahar, a different kind of wrong, a different kind of helplessness. The principle was the same. Document everything while you still can. At 8:30 in the morning, she called her older brother. Daniel Donovan was not a lawyer. He was a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army, currently assigned to the Pentagon's Judge Advocate General's Corps, and while he couldn't represent her personally, he knew people who could. He also had the particular quality, common to certain soldiers, of being absolutely unflappable in a crisis and absolutely furious on a time delay. When she finished telling him what had happened, there was a pause. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "I'm fine. Knees acting up, nothing new." Another pause, longer. "Okay," he said, "I'm going to give you a name." The name was Renata Okafor, a civil rights attorney in Hartford who had spent the last 12 years doing exactly this kind of work. Leah called her at 9. Okafor called back at 9:40. By 10:15, she had agreed to take the case. The next 2 weeks were strange in the way that bureaucratic wrongness is always strange. Not dramatic, mostly, but grinding. Okafor filed a formal complaint with the department. They requested the dashcam footage. It was delayed again, then finally released in a version that was, Okafor noted with a particular precision, 17 minutes shorter than it should have been based on the logged timestamps. "That's not an accident," Okafor said when she called Leah with the news. "No," Leah agreed. "It's also not subtle. Whoever did it was either confident nothing would come of this, or they didn't think anyone was counting." Leah was counting. She'd always been a counter. times, medications, vitals, the number of minutes between a soldier's wound and a surgical suite. Counting was how you stayed honest about what was real. The blood work came back clean, as she had known it would. Okafor filed that as an exhibit. Then the phone calls started. The first one came on a Tuesday evening, blocked number, a man's voice she didn't recognize telling her she should think carefully about the trouble she was causing. She recorded it and sent it to Okafor. The second came 3 days later, different voice, same general message. Leah documented them both in the file she'd started on her kitchen table. She wasn't frightened, or rather, she was, the way you could be frightened of a thing you'd already decided you were going to walk through anyway. She'd been under fire. Literally. She knew the difference between danger and intimidation, and she knew that intimidation only worked if you flinched. She didn't flinch. She went back to work. She ran her shifts. She stood at bedsides and held hands and read charts and pushed medication and did all of the 10,000 things that nursing required. And she did it on 4 and 5 hours of sleep because the case occupied the rest. Her colleagues knew something was happening. Word got around a hospital the way it got around every small community. But most of them said nothing, and the ones who did said things like, "We're with you," in the quiet, certain way of people who meant it. Her charge nurse, a woman named Beverly Marsh, who had worked trauma for 31 years, stopped her one morning in the medication room. "You hanging in?" Beverly asked. "I'm hanging," Leah said. Beverly looked at her for a moment. "Your grandmother a nurse?" "She was an army medic. Korea." Beverly nodded, as if this explained something. "All right," she said, and handed her a coffee, and that was all. But it was enough. Sergeant Dryden's report, when it was submitted to the conduct board, was, as he had promised, accurate. He wrote that there had been no articulable reasonable suspicion for the traffic stop. He wrote that the dashcam footage, in its original form, showed a vehicle operating normally prior to the stop. He wrote that the detainee had been cooperative, had submitted to a breathalyzer voluntarily, had disclosed a documented physical disability before the field sobriety test, and that the blood draw results had confirmed no impairment. He wrote that the footage gap was a matter requiring separate investigation. He submitted the report, and then, apparently, he waited to see what would happen. What happened was that Officer Hargrove hired a union attorney, and the conduct board meeting was postponed 3 times. What happened was that a local reporter, a 26-year-old named Priya Mendel, who covered county courts and local government for the Claremont Courier, filed a FOIA request for the incident report and the dashcam footage. What happened was that when Mendel published her story, she published it with the original timestamp data from the dashcam, which Leah had obtained and provided, alongside the released footage that was 17 minutes short. The gap was no longer a matter of institutional paperwork. The story ran on a Wednesday. By Friday, the state's attorney's office had opened an independent investigation. The conduct board met the following Monday. They met in a room Leah was not invited into, and they deliberated for 4 hours, and at the end of those 4 hours, they issued a finding. Okafor called her at 7 in the evening. "They sustained every count," she said. Leah sat down on the edge of her couch. "All of them. All of them. Unlawful stop, civil rights violation, failure to release detainee without probable cause. Hargrove is suspended without pay pending the state investigation." A pause, and the department has referred the footage gap to the state attorney's office as a separate matter. Leah was quiet for a moment. Outside her window, the street was doing what streets did, a car passing, a dog barking twice and stopping, the ordinary percussion of a neighborhood going about its evening. "That means someone else is involved," she said. "Someone altered that footage. It wasn't Hargrove alone." "No," Okafor said. "It wasn't." The state investigation took 4 months. Leah lived through them the way she lived through all difficult sustained things, incrementally, shift by shift, day by day. She gave her deposition in October. She sat across a long table from investigators she didn't know, and she answered every question they asked, and when they asked her to describe the night of the stop in detail, she was able to give it to them from the notes she had written at her kitchen table the morning after. While the coffee went cold and the sun came up, and she made herself remember everything before it could blur. The deposition lasted 6 hours. She went back to work the next morning. In November, the state issued its findings. Hargrove was charged with unlawful detention and civil rights violations. A lieutenant named Garrett Walsh, who had supervised the evidence lockup and had access to the Dashcam server, was charged with evidence tampering and obstruction of justice. The department's chief, facing the findings and the public record, issued a statement and then, 4 days later, submitted his resignation. Leah didn't celebrate. That wasn't the right word for it. She sat in her kitchen again, in the same chair, with a different cup of coffee, and she felt something that was close to relief and also not entirely that. More like, the particular stillness that comes after a long and necessary thing is finally done. She thought about the boy in bed 4. She thought about how he'd grabbed her hand and how small his hand had been and how she had held it and told him the truth, which was that his mother was just down the hall. That was the job. That was what it came down to, in the end. The civil suit settled in December. The terms were confidential, which meant she couldn't talk about the number, but she could say, and did say, when Priya Mendel called for a follow-up, that she had donated a portion of it to the Claremont General Nursing Fund and another portion to the Veterans Legal Aid Organization that Daniel had connected her with in the weeks before she'd found Okafor. "How do you feel?" Mendel asked. Leah thought about the question. She was standing in the parking lot of the hospital in the cold December air, still in her scrubs, holding her phone with her left hand because she'd just come off a shift and her right hand was still a little stiff. "I feel like I did something I had to do," she said, "and I feel like I want to go home and sleep." Mendel laughed. In January, the Claremont Police Department announced a new policy requiring independent third-party review of all dashcam footage in incidents involving detention without arrest. The policy was drafted, in part, using language developed by the state attorney's office based on the evidence gaps identified in Leah's case. She found out about it on a Tuesday morning from Beverly, who had read it on her phone while waiting for the elevator. "That's because of you," Beverly said. Leah hit the button for the 3rd floor. "That's because of a lot of people." Beverly gave her a look. "Don't do that." The elevator opened. She walked to the nurse's station, picked up her first chart of the morning, and started her rounds.